Hey everyone, geophysicist Stefan Burns here. Wow, what a ramp up in solar activity we have had. Boom shakalaka, 1.2 X-class flare today. And this feels good because we've been calling for enhanced solar activity now since May 29th when the original forecast was put out for basically the middle to end of June, specifically June 21st. We're ramping up towards that. Right now it's the 17th, nearly the 18th universal time, at least for this flare. And well, we got a boom shakalaka, 1.2, a pretty brief but intense burst of light. So in this video, we're just going to go over what a solar flare is in the first place, aka it's a giant explosion on the sun. But then we're going to go into some of the detail into, like for example, the light emission and the light curve of the sun. It doesn't appear that this solar flare launched a coronal mass ejection. So we do have some solar storms already inbound, though they're not direct shots towards us, but it looks like we have some elevated geomagnetic activity coming in really probably with the next 24 to 48 hours. That's kind of the estimate. It's actually, a lot of people are estimating starting on the 18th at midnight universal time. So that could be in like an hour. I think that's a little too soon. But we could very well have more solar flares like this from 4114. Notice this little harmonic flare that followed right afterwards. So clearly this whole area kind of active. We'll look at some different views of the sun. I can pull up this one actually right here and I'll turn myself off, okay? But I want you to watch this area of the flare. You'll notice some plasma filaments in this area. You see that they don't get disturbed. So we don't also have a shock wave from this. And that's why it doesn't appear that it's launching a coronal mass ejection. But we do see this solar flare there in our 171 angstrom view. And in general, when you get a big explosion on the sun, you're going to get some destabilization of different factors there. And you're going to change the electromagnetic field. And it's really, in this instance, we're kind of concerned more about the electric field dynamics, because that's one of the things that controls these plasma filaments, for example. And you get those things to start breaking, and then the magnetic field is really going to start going nuts, and then you could get even more activity. But it looks like this was just a very short, brief punch of photons, of light radiation that was hit square over Hawaii. And so I find that interesting. Let's look at our radiation map. And hello, welcome everyone to the live stream. Hope you're all doing well. I know this, I've been waiting for this X-flare. I've been waiting for this X-flare for like 48 hours now. Just like, okay, come on, because I wanted to make sure I get a video of it when it was happening. I didn't want to be 8 hours late or 14 hours late or something, or 3 days late like some of the other space weather people. Like, we want the information and we want it now. I respect your time and I respect your desire to be up to date with the latest when it is happening, which is why I am live right now. That is my promise to you. I've said this many times before. I consider myself like an on-call geophysicist. So if there is something that is happening, breaking, like a big solar flare, a huge earthquake, volcanic eruption, something like that, I'm your guy. I will be on the tube. We also just had a big volcanic eruption in Indonesia. Luatobi volcano blasted off and sent a ash column up 6 miles. So about 37,000 feet, somewhere around there. So 10,000 meters plus. I mean, really, really crazy stuff. Huge eruption from Luatobi volcano that occurred before this X-class flare. But we often see these sort of energetic events clustered together. It's pretty common, actually, having been doing this for a while now, to see there be some sort of big earth event like a volcanic eruption or an earthquake at the same time, roughly in 24 hours, as there being some sort of big solar flare. It's not necessarily that the flare is first and then the eruption or earthquake is second. Sometimes it's the opposite, but in general, it's kind of speaking to the fact that maybe there's some sort of pulse of activity that's moving through the solar system, like some sort of quantum pulse of energy manifestation. We don't really know exactly what it is. Now here is, we caught that R3 radio blackout triggered by that 1.2 X-class flare right there. This is our DRAP model, and so it shows effectively the light side of the Earth. So the side of the Earth that's facing the sun, right? There's always half the Earth in light and another half in darkness. And so this is all the dark side. and we see that the Earth is rotating into view of the sun. So we see this slowly move across. Now it's daylight in South America, North America, right? Well, as the day progresses on, we're going to see it be noon exactly, high noon zenith, right there over Hawaii when that flare pops off. And because it is getting really close to solstice now, the Earth is tilted. Hawaii is pretty close to the equator. We notice that the majority of the light radiation, that highest area there, is basically right along that same latitude line. So watch that. We get a little preview pulse, and then there's that 1.2x flare right there. Boom! R3 radio blackout. A longer duration R2, R1 radio blackout. And now things are back to normal because it was a pretty brief affair. But anyone that was using radio frequencies across certain bands in Hawaii may have picked up that and been like, hey, why does everything get degraded so quickly? What's happening right now? Well, he just got hit with a solar flare. And so I saw this live. I made sure to go outside right afterwards, do some grounding because A, that helps balance your energies, and B, I want to pick up those light codes. The Earth takes these energies, absorbs them into the ionosphere, and then creates these electric currents that if you're standing on the ground, you can absorb that information perhaps. Energy and information. It's not created nor destroyed. So, I want all the good light codes. I think that's really good stuff. Here we have our X-ray flux, so we can see the pulse of that X-class flare. Just look at this. I mean, coming out of basically nothing, right? So we have our baseline X-ray flux, which is higher. I'm going to again explain the light spectrum in a second. We're just going through the standard solar activity report right now. But look how quickly it jumped up by about an order of magnitude, so a 10x increase, because this is a log scale. We're measuring this in watts per meter squared. And since it's X-ray flux, which is very highly vibrational, you notice that it's fairly low in the watts per meter squared. But when you get an X-ray flare, it can go up. An X flare can go up quite significantly. So if you really punch in on this, it's a 1.2, nearly a 1.3 on the scale. As you see there, right around 21:48 to 49 universal time for the peak, and then that drop off was not a long duration flare by any means. Did not appear to launch a coronal mass ejection our way. Let us check that out too. So let's go to our coronagraph imagery. We're not going to have much because it's just happening. We're getting this pretty soon after it happened, folks. There we go. And but we can see what's on the coronagraph. But again, it doesn't look like we have anything to really talk about as it relates to a coronal mass ejection for this. So really maybe a preview of more to come. That could be the strongest solar flare we get of this sequence, who knows, but it's certainly exciting, and it still has an effect in terms of the light radiation, though a solar storm impact is definitely more significant. Watch our time, right? We just passed over the time, and we didn't see anything pop from that. Let me scroll this around. Yeah, aloha. Aloha, everyone. Mahalo for being here. That's thank you in the native Hawaiian tongue. We have some people from Hawaii in the chat, so represent. You guys got blasted directly. I hope you're feeling good. But if you look right there, we don't see like a full halo or anything. What we do see is Jupiter coming in for a superior conjunction, this Cazimi. I've been talking about this. This is one of the reasons why I've been forecasting there to be enhanced solar activity and or geophysical disturbances here on Earth because of the planetary geometry. So we're not going to go in depth on the planetary geometry. In this video, we've been talking about it kind of ad nauseum. Don't want to just be repeating myself constantly. But we do see Jupiter swinging in on the far side, actually for us about 6 astronomical units away, because it's 5 AU away from the sun. And AU is astronomical unit. We are 1 astronomical unit with our position here on Earth. So it doesn't look like there's a coronal mass ejection that's been launched from this. Earthquakes, let's just quickly talk about earthquakes, see what's been happening. This is for the past 24 hours, and largest earthquake, that 5.3 in the Philippines right here. And just most recently, we've had this 5.0 South Sandwich Islands there in the Drake's Passage zone. So no really big earthquakes, but sometimes we get these earthquakes clustered around solar flares. So we could see some more earthquake activity pop off. Let us talk about our light spectrum. Let's talk about what a solar flare is. Okay, so you have a big explosion on the sun, and this can be many times the size of the Earth. And actually, maybe I should show you that, because I've had some people on and off, they ask, hey, can you put this into context with the size of the Earth? And I do it every now and then because it's a useful educational tool to help us understand what the heck is happening. So, wrong way. Thank you for the very generous super thanks, dude. Thanks, Stefan. Thank you, Stefan, for the insight. Now I know why I'm feeling punch drunk. Well, you may just be punch drunk. I'm not sure it's a solar activity, but I mean, perhaps. I'm not going to discount it. Everyone's individual. Who's me to say or judge? But there's a lot of factors included with health and wellness for sure. But I've also had family members. I've experienced this myself. The effects of solar activity doesn't happen that often for me, but it does. Here we have, let me pull this back over to our Helio viewer. Here we have this solar flare, basically right at the time, and here's the Earth, okay? So imagine, we can even zoom in, I think, further. Imagine an explosion much, much bigger than the Earth, okay? So this, if the Earth was sitting right there at the apex of that sunspot, and then that explosion happened, we would all burn together. The whole Earth would be gone. So these are very, very, very big energy explosions. You can't even, I mean, you can, but you can't really even put them in the context of like a nuclear bomb drop or something. This is so much larger than that. It really kind of boggles the mind. So significantly, significantly, significantly bigger than basically anything you can imagine. And this, of course, pales in comparison to something like a supernova event, right? And they have even sometimes like these even bigger like galactic nova events. So it gets really wild, folks. The universe is a crazy place, but we see that this explosion here is much bigger than our lovely Earth. And we can go back a little bit to see kind of, because we're looking at the light image from this, right? So we are seeing the light photons. The actual, maybe you could say epicenter of the explosion could be smaller if it's kind of here, right? But even there, that's still really, really big. So Earth would not have had a good time, but that's why we were at 1 astronomical unit. We are a comfortable distance away from the sun, thankfully, but that does mean that these light photons hit us in 8.3 minutes. So let us go back to our light spectrum. Okay, so the sun is always emitting light. As far as we know, it hasn't just turned off at any point. So it's always emitting light. Most of the light that it emits is in the visible light spectrum. So what we see. So it makes sense that one of our primary senses, and the most dominant sense for most people, is visible light. And we actually see a very narrow spectrum of that. It's like 380 to 780 nanometers, around there, something like that. That's pretty close to accurate. We see just a very narrow slice of the light spectrum with our eyeballs. If you have really good eyesight, you can see a little bit into ultraviolet. Like I know that when I'm looking at the moon, of the full moon, I'll see the ultraviolet like halo around it. Not a halo, like in the aura around it. Just like a very subtle ultraviolet pulsing light just immediately around the circumference of the moon. Certain flowers, if you like look at the piston and stamen, we have some Asian water lilies in the garden here. It has like an ultraviolet like color to it. So if you have, and I have good eyes. So if you have really good eyes, you can maybe see ultraviolet, but that's basically it. But that's where the majority of the light from our sun is coming out. And then it has this very long curve going down there where it emits a lot of thermal radiation or infrared. And then it also emits a lot of ultraviolet light, which is why you can go outside, and if you're out at the beach too long, you'll get a sunburn. No one wants that. That's the ultraviolet light, because that is strong enough now to ionize and break bonds. And so you get a lot of ultraviolet light hitting. You're creating a lot of free radical damage. You maybe even are breaking some DNA strands, single or double, causing basically DNA repair mechanisms to kick into effect. Do that enough times, you start to get cancer. So you don't want to get too much ionizing light, okay? Well, thankfully for us, under normal situations, the sun then radically drops its light flux, or its irradiation, as we see here, for the extreme ultraviolet part of the spectrum and then the X-ray part of the spectrum. So we see that most of the light energy is in ultraviolet, visible, infrared. We do also have radio frequency emissions. We can zoom in specifically kind of like on this part of the curve right here. And then also even further in right there. So there's different specific wavelength breakdowns on this chart here. You can screenshot that if you want. But once you get to X-ray flux, it's quite low. So here we see 10 to the 6, 1000, 10, or 0.1. And X-ray flux is below 0.1. So the majority, again, the majority of light radiation is in here. Total solar irradiance, so this is all the light energy combined together, hovers around 1,362. And then during solar maximum, it may go up to 1,365. So there's a little slight variation. There is more light energy output from the sun during solar maximum. And most of that change is concentrated here. We see this green line. What's this green line? This is showing us the variability. So you notice that there's very low variability right here in the infrared part. That basically doesn't change from solar min to solar max. We get a little bit of change as you go to the lower frequencies. We see that our radio frequencies undergo some changes. So during solar minimum, our radio frequency emissions are like here. During solar maximum, when we have an active sun, we have greater radio frequency emissions like these radio bursts from the sun. We probably had one from this solar flare, but I couldn't find the spectrogram data for it. And we see that our variability in light output goes up as you then go into the extreme ultraviolet section, which again is strong enough to break bonds. And then into the X-ray section, it shows the highest variability because of these solar flares. It can be quiet and X-ray flux can be fairly low, and then boom, you can get a massive 10, 100, 1000x increase in X-ray flux. And you also have about a 1000x increase in X-ray flux going from solar minimum to maximum. So if you're standing outside and you're like basically looking at the sun, or you're sunbathing when there's an X flare, the energy from that X flare is not really hitting you, not in terms of the X-ray flux, because that gets absorbed into the ionosphere, the uppermost part of the atmosphere. It generates a little bit more plasma up there and creates these stronger electric potentials and therefore these electric currents. That may interact with you a little bit bioelectrically in a variety of ways, but in general, it's not like the X-ray light, very little of it will actually get through the ionosphere and hit you. So you don't have to worry about like being burned alive by an X-class flare or something. Maybe there's like an ultra super mega flare or something. I don't know what the upper limit is, but I don't think you have to worry about standing there and being incinerated by a solar flare anytime soon. But you will have those radio frequencies hit you, and there will be more ultraviolet, visible, and infrared radiation from that solar flare. So there's subtle changes. But the next thing I want to talk about, now that we've broken down our light spectrum, is, just in general, we effectively, our entire conscious experience is made up and determined by light and electromagnetism, which the photon is the carrier of the electric and the magnetic field, right? Because we see light, our ears have sound waves hit them, and that converts into electromagnetic signals that travel down the auditory nerve. We have taste buds on our tongues that convert chemical bindings to electromagnetic signals. We smell things, olfactory, same mechanism. And then our sense of feel converts tactile sensation into electromagnetic signals that travel through our nerves to our brain. And actually, even when I'm doing this, I'm not actually touching myself, right? Because the space between atoms, I'm sure you guys have all heard of that before. So we live in a weird, wacky world of electromagnetism, but fundamentally, our entire conscious experience is based upon light. So it stands to reason, you don't have to be a genius, it stands to reason that changes in your light environment are going to have some sort of change in your conscious experience. That is going to be a stronger effect the more in resonance and in tune with that you are. The more disconnected you are, the less you're going to basically probably feel these effects. It'll still affect you, but it'll do so more unconsciously, which is probably not good for you, right? The more unconscious something is, the less kind of ability you have to work with it, order it, structure it, and work with, utilize those energies harmoniously. And for your true soul purpose and your consciousness evolution journey, you could say. So here we have, and I've shown this graphic before. We just talked about this quite a bit on my latest podcast with Dan Waits, that World Astrology Report. It's like a 2-hour long podcast going deep into everything on the sun, the consciousness of the sun, and much, much more. I'll link that in the video description after this video, but if you haven't watched that yet, definitely give that a watch. It's a great long form. Put that on a lazy day, or if you want to just like blast off to outer space, that is the podcast to do it. We talked about this in that video, but here we see the relationship between solar activity and what are known as spontaneous social processes. So effectively something like a revolution. That's a classic example. It's kind of spontaneous. You know, there's of course underlying factors and there's a build up to it, but it needs that spark for the fire. You know, everything leading up to a revolution was building a fire, but it still needs that spark. That's the spontaneous part. Well, look at all the significant revolutions. They all stack on top of solar maximum periods, because here we have our solar activity wolf number, which effectively is like a measure of sunspots, but it's a little different than that. It's like a yearly count. And so we see the American Revolution, solar cycle 3, right there, boom, solar maximum. French Revolution, boom, solar maximum. All these other ones, solar maximum. We don't show solar cycle 25 in this graphic because it's still underway at this time. So the question is, what's the revolution going to be for solar cycle 25 maximum? It's almost like every time we have a solar max, we have a revolution, and certainly things are looking very spicy right now. If you have any eyeballs focus on world events, you know that there's some very concerning things unfolding right now on the world stage. A lot of it's a show, a lot of it is not a show. So this is just showing that in general, when you have higher solar activity, you have more energy output from the sun, things like these solar flares, these X flares, these solar storm impacts, all that stuff, enhanced solar wind, all that stuff generally energizes the Earth geophysical system. There's a wealth of research into the connection between geophysics and biophysics. It's a very niche subject, but there are some good souls out there who have bridged the gap, that have the requisite knowledge in both to be able to bridge that gap. I'll put a link for one in the video description. It's a simple paper, not hard to read, from 1964, just to show you that this goes back a ways. I'll do that after the video. And then you have, in general, just because of this geophysics, biophysics link, you have an activation of the metabolism and the energy and your autonomic nervous system, so your sympathetic system, and basically cortisol. And it just kind of fires up the energy system a little bit more, which gets people a little bit more agitated, perhaps nervous, anxious, a little bit more individualistic, perhaps, to kind of like to strike out and do kind of maybe crazy nutso things. So this is the relationship that we have going back to solar cycle 1 right here at the mid 1750s between solar activity and spontaneous social processes. So if you track this stuff, I'm sure, if you track it often, I'm sure you know how it affects your mood, like you yourself. And if you really track it, you'll also observe how changes in solar activity affect people around you. And then if you look at the more macro scale, you can track how it changes entire populations across time. It's really quite fascinating stuff. We talk about all that on the channel. If you're new here, hello and welcome. I'm your host, Stefan Burns. We just had a 1.2 X-class flare. Let us look at it again, because this is just such a beautiful flare. This time, let's go full screen and let us just enjoy that. That is the first X-class flare we have had in some time, because we had that last solar storm that hit us on June 1st that was launched from a long duration 8.2 M-class flare. So that did not reach that X-class level. That was a much bigger flare in terms of overall energy release. And there was multiple flares that occurred afterwards that were lower and lower in terms of their size. But in terms of reaching the peak amount of X-ray flux, this guy is the biggest that we've had in some time. So that's why we're focusing so much on the light aspect. It's this really quick, transient, powerful pulse of light radiation. And so you don't get a solar storm effect from this because it's too short duration. You get a radio blackout, and then maybe it's like a in terms of consciousness and activity, maybe there's some change, kind of some quick change that can occur, but you're generally not going to get some long duration alteration from a solar flare like this without a solar storm, unless you get like a machine gun of them to go off. And also you have to keep in mind where this hit. So this was over Hawaii, basically exactly over Hawaii. So if you're on the nighttime side, it doesn't mean it didn't affect you, but it's not necessarily getting you directly, maybe through more indirect geophysical means. Because again, if we go back to our DRAP model, we'll see the location here smack dab over Hawaii, R3 radio blackout, then R2, R1. So that, I think, covers it. If you have any questions, now's the time to ask. We'll do a question and answer. And just in general, just type at Stefan Burns so I can see that. Please stay on topic. I'm not going to answer questions that are just in general not close to the topic at hand. We've had a pretty wide-ranging discussion here, so that leaves a lot of room open for people. And if you attach a question to a super thanks, I will answer that first and give it priority just because that's fair. You're putting some money behind it, and that's just an option that YouTube has. So yeah, if you have a question, again, now's the time to ask. And just one more thank you to Wrong Way for the extremely generous super thanks. So incredible. Thank you so much, dude. And we have a new one that just came in from Anime Tor and Fiddler, which is thank you for keeping us updated. I try to scan through the news daily and it is almighty impossible to catch everything. Yes, so I do my best to keep you up to date on space weather, Earth geophysical events, geologic events like earthquakes, volcanoes, and then also, I do a lot of deep research into possibilities and unknowns. I do a lot of research into like the conspiracy realm and UFOs and UAP and ancient history and all this stuff. And I don't often dig into the weeds with that, but as someone that has learned how to do really good research, I also have a really good bullshit detector. So that helps me to see a lot of these things that are in that kind of field, you could say, because there's so much BS in there. I do my best to distill that for you guys to provide that service. So thank you so much for the super thanks. And let's go to our questions. And we have one right away from Angel777, which is, will this solar flare cause an uptick in earthquake activity on volcanoes? Did you know that Arizona had shooting out ashes? So you're probably talking about Luotobi volcano. Yeah, massive eruption at Luotobi volcano. Here we see this massive, like 6-mile high ash column from Luotobi volcano in Indonesia. Massive eruption this morning. Really, really incredible stuff. So yeah, we've had a lot of things happening, you could say. And great question from Helen asking, is there an interplay between space weather and extreme weather events? Yes, there is. We don't have a billion research papers on this, but there is quite a lot of research connecting changes to tropospheric weather and space weather, especially like coronal hole high-speed streams, which we've been having on and off now for a while. And so they show that you can get like changes of zonal wind velocity, and you get changes to humidity, cloud cover, the global electric circuit, the conductivity column, from the ground surface up to the ionosphere, all from space weather impacts. You can get changes to vorticity. So if you already have systems that are starting to rotate, that can change the vorticity like from 0 to 72 hours afterwards. And so, yeah, when you have solar maximum, in general, you have stronger weather systems. I do have one graphic I can pull up, which really clearly, pretty clearly demonstrates this. I mean, some people really get upset at me pointing out this connection because they think it doesn't exist. And but they just clearly haven't read the research. So there's a lot of dumb people out there who like to say they know everything, but don't even do the basic read the research paper to actually see what the heck is happening. Look at this data. Here we have solar radial flux and super bolts. Super bolts are the biggest of lightning bolts, okay? So they can be massive. This one is 744 miles across. It's not like they last a long time, but they can be absolutely massive, 100 times, 1,000 times stronger than a normal lightning bolt, okay? So that sounds like extreme weather to me, right? So you're talking about extreme weather events. Well, super bolt is an extreme weather event. Look at how the frequency goes up dramatically during solar maximum. But this is solar cycle 24. We see our solar radial flux. This was a weak solar cycle, mind you, okay? A weak solar cycle. And look at how super bolt frequency went up crazy and then went back down on the descending phase. Wild stuff. So there's definitely a connection between what we experience here on Earth and what is happening with the sun. You just have to have a couple brain cells to kind of put it together. But I will, just to be clear, there's a lot more that we don't know. It's not like we know the exact relationship. It's just we see a picture and it's pretty blurry, but we see a picture. The TV's at least on. That's kind of like the metaphor I can give you about at least what I believe, okay? This is all just what I believe. Do your own research, come to your own conclusions. But we see a picture, and my goal is to get that as high as resolution as possible. So that's what I'm doing with my research, my videos, my presentations, everything. So if you want to stay at the bleeding edge and get that HD image when it comes in, then please subscribe to the channel. And yeah, Highland Space Weather Club, big supporter. Weather is getting worse over the United States. Does it come from the solar space weather? It doesn't help. It doesn't help. If you have a lot of solar activity, it's just probably going to enhance that. Again, the picture's blurry, but it seems just this year, it's been really clear. If you've been paying attention, it's been really clear. Anytime you've had like geomagnetic storms and space weather, the tornado outbreaks have just gone wild in the United States. Especially that was in March and April and May, with that coronal hole high-speed stream sweeping by. Like every time we had that connection to the high-speed stream, all of a sudden we had a huge tornado outbreak across the U.S. So yeah, it's definitely connected. And in general, we're in that solar maximum phase right now. Yeah, we're talking about this flare that was at 21:56 today, UTC. That's Universal Time. What was the paper that you referenced in 1964? I'll put that in the video description, okay? So just hang around and check back later, and I'll put that in the video description, all right? It's a fairly simple paper. And an interesting question from de Klerk, which is the sun losing mass with these flares? Yes, it is. It's not much, but it is losing mass every single time there's a coronal mass ejection. So, I mean, technically, with the solar flares, an explosion doesn't necessarily mean that it launched anything out. So it looks like this one didn't have that coronal mass ejection. So, everything, there was a big explosion of energy, but it stayed put. Photons don't have mass. Light photons don't have mass, but plasma does. So if you have plasma launch out from the sun, it is losing mass with every single, big coronal mass ejection, which you get from a solar flare. And we have some more super things that came in. Let me get to these. One from Yvonne, thank you so much. And then also from Infinity7, we have a super thanks. Truly appreciate your knowledge on everything. Much respect and love. Well, thank you so much. Love and light to you as well, Infinity. And something from, no question, but nothing but love, Stefan from Carolina, 1961. Thanks for paying it all forward. Much appreciated. I do my best. That's effectively, I consider that my responsibility at this moment in time. Have I read the book of Revelation? Make some connections for us. I've read a few pages of Revelations, the beginning, and some of the beginning pages of the Bible. But I haven't really read through the Bible, to be honest. I mean, you read phrases here and there. I think it's interesting, but I haven't sat down and just gone through the entire Old and New Testament. So that's something I'll eventually do. I'm much more drawn to Eastern spiritual beliefs like Hinduism and Buddhism, but I was, baptized Catholic, so I guess it's in the soul. And then a super thanks from Lion, which is just thank you. You're an awesome soul. Follow you on Instagram. Always look forward to your videos. Yeah, I have an Instagram. I don't really post much there, but I do have one at Stefan Burns Official. And some more questions from people. Let's see what I can pull up. The sun is shooting back up again. Currently a 1.3 M-class flare. Boom shakalaka. Let's check it out. Oh yeah, we're back at an R1 radio blackout. All right. We're doing it live, folks. Oh yeah, it's definitely shooting up. Okay, let me pull this up for you guys. We are doing it live. I love it. Here is our X-ray flux. Not that button. Here's our X-ray flux, and we see that we are now ramping back up again. Though this is actually a really great teaching moment because this is a 1.3 M-class flare according to Dan, and this is a 1.2 X-class flare. So this is exactly 10 times less X-ray flux than this one, nearly exactly 10 times less, because 1.3 M-class is an order of magnitude lower than a 1.2 X-class. So, but it does look like we're ramping up again. We can look at our SUVI imagery to check that out, see just kind of where that's coming from. And it's coming from the limb. We do have a new sunspot group rotating in from the limb. So it looks like we have some sympathetic flaring now. We get boom, boom, and then boom down there. You'll also notice a little bit of a little thing shoot off right there during this sequence. This is 3 hours of the most recent SUVI imagery. So the new 1.3 M-class flare from this group rotating in. It has 2 weeks to go, folks. So we could be wild activity for the next 2 weeks based off of that one. That's kind of rare for it to last that long, but in terms of like active flaring, but we will see. And we got a super thanks from Just Another Patty. Looks like your black grounding boots arrived just in time. That's awesome. Here we have a pair actually of the black grounding boots. So I sell these on the website Wild Free Organic. If you want to be grounded more often in your day-to-day, these earthing shoes are awesome. I have sandals, I have shoes, I have boots. I love the boots for like gardening, like especially if I'm like using the wheelbarrow and I'm like using a shovel and that sort of gardening, some heavier work. These are great, all leather construction. They do have a pattern stamped into them for some extra grip, and that copper plug at the K1 Meridian, all leather, super well made in Turkey. I visited guys myself. They're awesome. Really wonderful team making these shoes in Turkey. Also the sandals, which are custom design, made for Wild Free Organic only. You know, all of you guys, all the supporters on the channel and more, and also the shoes. So yeah, these are awesome, awesome, awesome. Really happy to have these boots now available for everyone. They're fantastic. And you can use the code SOLSTICE right now for 5% off, by the way. I forgot I had this code active, but just SOLSTICE, all in caps, for 25% off. And then Kirsten is asking, could this have caused extreme fatigue about an hour ago to someone in the Southwest United States? Yeah, it could have. I mean, it's perfect timing. So that's kind of the thing with solar activity and space weather, in my mind, is if the timing is like spot on, like you have a notebook, a log, you're really keeping track of this, and it lines up perfectly, and then you get that multiple times in a row. Like, wow, okay, 5 times now in a row, I felt, let's say, extreme fatigue, and then I found out later that the solar flare occurred right then and there. Well, now you got a connection. I think a lot of people jump the gun and they blame solar activity for their own health and wellness problems. That's certainly the case for some percentage of people, unfortunately. But if you have a really analytical, scientific analysis, and like you keep a journal of this stuff and you make the connection, because it is there for you, and that connection materializes, then you have a really strong case, you could say. But you don't want to convince yourself that you're going to have health symptoms from solar activity, because, well, guess what? We're in solar maximum, so you're going to be in a lot of pain and suffering. Better to convince yourself that you get a boost of creativity and energy from that. But everyone manifests their own reality. So leave it at that. But it's possible. It's definitely possible. I'm not just going to say, no, it's not possible, because it is. A lot of people do resonate with this stuff in that way. What time did the blackout happen in Hawaii? That'd be 21:48 Universal Time. And so that's quite a ways back for Hawaii. I think it's nearly opposite. So it was at noon, basically exactly noon for Hawaii is when that occurred, right around that time frame. And Chris is saying a lot of YouTubers have the 21st as a significant day. I'm wondering, what do you think about it? Some type of collective consciousness. Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I've been talking about the 21st of June because of the planetary geometry since May 29th, when I first identified that day. So if other people perhaps now watch the channel and they're repeating that day, then it could be I was the one that initiated that. I don't know, but I do have a few, you know, I have more than 2 subscribers now. We're going to hit 330,000 tonight. So, you know, it's a few people. But this is just based on my analysis with planetary geometry. There very well could be people doing their own analyses of different things, or maybe they had a dream and the 21st came to them. I think that's almost certainly the case. That's not just me completely, setting the course. It's a significant day. We can look at the heliocentric planetary geometry right here. The sun is in the center. This is sidereal signs. So basically the constellation is true sky, because it doesn't matter whether it's Western tropical or sidereal. We're really just looking at the angles between the planets. We have a grand cross active on the 21st. We have a grand trine active on the 21st. And we also have a kite configuration active on the 21st. All three, that's really rare. That's why I've been talking about the fact that strong magnetic storm is likely. And so based off of that, I actually think that this is probably just a warm-up X-flare. I think we probably have something bigger over the next couple days. We'll have to wait and see. But this was not impulsive in terms of like launching a coronal mass ejection. So I think we have more on the way. But we'll just have to wait and see. A question from Vanessa is, I was wondering if all the volcanic activity is spewing crystal rocks and how the solar activity reacts to that. That's a good question. Because of that most recent eruption at Luitobi volcano in Indonesia, it's blasting a whole bunch of basically, igneous rock up, but it's just ash and very fine-grained crystal particles or glass fragments and particles, a lot of dust that reflects a lot of sunlight, but eventually it'll spread out. Some that actually kind of absorbs it. Sulfur dioxide will reflect sunlight, but it does change how our planet interacts with the solar light energy coming in. So when it's in a vertical column like that, not a big deal. But once it starts to spread out, especially like a really big eruption, which we haven't had for a while, but it spreads out, that really significantly starts to alter the geophysics of the planet. This, by the way, is Tranquility. Excellent iced tea. It's really good. Chamomile, dandelion root, lemongrass, and lavender flower, as well as, calendula flower. Really, really good stuff. I sell that on the website if you're interested. Really good for helping you kind of relax and calm down from stuff. Here's one from Michelle asking, do we have an incoming binary system and is it affecting our sun? That's an interesting question. I go in depth on that in the Planetary Resonances e-course that I've made. Like I go really in depth in that. So anyone that's signed up for the Planetary Resonances e-course and they've gone to that module, then they are aware of that. If you go to e-courses on my website, here's the Planetary Resonances one. You just click there to get to the page. Alternatively, the URL is wildfreeorganic.com/planetary-resonances. This is 15 hours of video content where I go into a whole bunch of things. For example, all the inner planets, the moon, the outer planets, their synodic cycles. I mean, these are all like 20, 30 minute long videos. So really good stuff here, folks. Really good stuff. Here is where we talk about it. The precession of the equinoxes and the astrological ages. Notice the time, 1 hour 30 minutes, 1 hour 30 minutes. It's 3 hours of content on basically the binary star system, because that's what I think is probably the case. I think we probably do have an ultra-wide binary star, probably a brown dwarf, and that's what causes the precession of the equinoxes as we revolve around each other in an ecliptic orbit, right? Then that will cause there to be a precession across time. This triggers the great year and more. So yeah, I think so. But we don't really have the strongest evidence for that. But Sri Yukteswar certainly thinks so. Indian mystic from the turn of the 19th century, 19th or turn of 20th century, lived in the 1800s and early 1900s. He wrote it down in his book, The Holy Science, at the beginning, just like it's like a common knowledge thing. Like, oh yeah, of course we have a binary star. Kali Yuga ended at 500 AD. So, it's not like there's universal agreement as to the fact that precession is caused from some tilt or wobble of the earth. There's plenty of people where they live in a totally different reality where it's like, oh yeah, of course we have a binary star, right? So it's a lot to research into. If you don't want to do all the research, you just rather get a lot of really good information. You don't have to necessarily just like immediately believe what I say. I definitely don't recommend that, but I lay this out very methodically for you all and present everything. So this is a great e-course for you to check out. The Planetary Resonances e-course. Fantastic, fantastic stuff. And we have a super thanks from Rob saying, just to say thank you. Well, thank you so much, good sir. Really appreciate your support. And Maria, your support as well. Thank you so much for the quid. And from Nature Boy, we have a super thanks. Thank you so much. Love you, brother. Look up the discovery that ancient Chinese before Buddhism all worshipped Yahweh, the God of the Bible. Yeshua means Yahweh that saves. He is the human image of the Most High God. Awesome. Well, there's been on and off for many years now, thousands of years, monotheistic worship. So there's been cycles across time of people believing in multiple gods and one God. And I think we all know that, fundamentally the universe comes from one wellspring of creation, which we can call God. But there's a lot of words we can use that, just like universe as well, and that God has many faces. So if, in my mind, if someone's worshiping or believes in multiple deities or God, it's really just the fact that these are different expressions of God. But yeah, if you want to condense it down and get right to the spring, the source, then yeah, there's just one eternal source of creation. That's what I believe. Eduardo is asking, in your opinion, how likely could another Carrington event happen with the high solar activity right now? Thank you. Interesting question. Let me pull up something for to kind of answer that question. I mean, you can't really answer it if we're being honest, but we can definitely contemplate it. Here we have a video from Solar Cycle 24. This is September 6, 2017. This is like a 13.3 X-class flare. That's a big solar flare. Keep in mind, Solar Cycle 24 was quite weak. Bomb of Gleisberg cycle, yet we had a huge solar flare from the sun. So it's not so much solar cycle dependent, it's more sunspot dependent. You need a big sunspot that has a lot of shearing and complexity to get these really big explosions. And then the Carrington event was special because not only was it a really big solar flare, it launched directly the coronal mass ejection towards us. It was very high velocity. It had the right magnetic field connection to trigger a significant geomagnetic storm. Basically, it checked the list and it got like an A+ on all the different categories, where generally one of the categories will be deficient for most solar flares. Now this was, this launched some stuff our way back in 2017, but it wasn't a Carrington level. But I'm just showing you this video because these sort of powerful solar flares can occur even during periods of low activity. So Solar Cycle 25 has been stronger than 24, stronger than initially expected. It does seem to be cooling off now that we are still in that maximum phase and kind of going to descending now phase 2. But it's definitely progressing forward. But yeah, we could have a Carrington event this solar cycle. It's not out of the books. If we can have this during Solar Cycle 24, we can have a Carrington event in Solar Cycle 25, really at any point in time except maybe the ultra bottom of solar minimum, because that's just very unlikely. I mean, I'm never going to discount it. Across millions of years, I'm sure that's happened. But it's more common during very active solar cycles, but we also see them occur during not the most active solar cycles. And we can actually look at 1859 to see that solar cycle, because that's when the Carrington event occurred. I don't think 1859 was all that special of a solar cycle, if I remember right. Let's go back in time. Let's do a little bit of investigation into it. We have, well, it was a significant solar cycle. We can zoom in here. Let's punch in on it. It was September of 1859. It was actually during the, yeah, so this wasn't the strongest solar cycle. Let me move my screen over now. Okay. See, this is what we do on the channel. We do some actual research. Good stuff. Live. We do it live. I'm standing, it's basically right in the middle here. So here is, I'm not sure which solar cycle this is. This is 25, 4, 3, 2, 1, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 9, 8. Solar cycle 8 right here. Should be 8. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Maybe it's 10. Somewhere in that zone. Sorry. Sorry, folks. I'm doing my best. I wish they just put a simple label right on. But either way, this solar cycle is where the Carrington event occurred. And we had September of 1959. So we can go right here. It's on the peak of the first peak of this one. Sunspot count was 200.9. Okay. that's less than the count that we had in August for solar cycle 25. And just to step off so you can see this again, that's a strong solar cycle. If we zoom over to our most current solar cycle, here we have August 215. That's August 24 for that peak. Here's May 79, big drop. Look at that volatility in our solar cycle. That is very anomalous. You don't really see that across the entire record, so that's odd. So yeah, wild stuff. And one question from Paul is, why do you use tropical instead of sidereal? I use both. Tropical is for the seasons. It's a totally different system. So you just have to recognize that we're going off the progression of the seasons, and the signs are not the constellations. The signs are the signs. Constellations are what's happening up in the sky, but the signs are season-based. Once you get that, tropical makes sense. But if you're stuck on the signs are different than what's happening in the sky, you'll never get past it. And you'll just wonder why everyone uses tropical. Tropical is really good for understanding your local reference frame. Because in the tropical reference frame, if you are at a certain degree from like in the solar system, like a certain degree angle in the solar system, you're back at that certain degree angle because it's fixed. Whereas sidereal is now always in flux because the constellations are undergoing precession, right? We're undergoing precession. So that is changing. So in terms of like more galactic or cosmic things, sidereal is the best. As it relates to heliocentric, like planetary geometry, I think sidereal is the best. It actually doesn't matter really in my mind because we're just looking at the angles in the geometry. But as it relates to like maybe certain degree positions in our solar system reference frame have certain energies to them, you want to use Western Tropical for that because that doesn't change. And we've been having that record now go back more than 2,000 years. So that's why it's important. Okay, we have a super thanks ready to show that one. We have another one though. Another one from Nature Boy saying, ask, seek, and knock. You have all the tools that you need to start researching. I agree. And then another super thanks from Divinalia, which is all its consciousness, one love, namaste, beloveds. And that is where we will end it today. Thank you all so much for watching. I've been your host, Stefan Burns. That's what we cover on this channel: solar activity, space weather, planetary resonances, cosmic forces, geologic events, geologic energies, and more. We just had that new 1.5 M-class flare, maybe peaked at 1.5 M-class flare after this 1.2 X-class flare. So I will keep you up to date with what is happening with the sun because things certainly have been getting exciting, though we haven't had a 13.3 X-class flare yet. This again is September 6th of 2017. I believe it's September 6th of 2017. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you found this video valuable. If you did, smash that like button. It really helps the algorithm. It truly does help this channel grow, makes all the work that I put in worth it, and helps all of us come together and form this community and make it larger and larger. And that's really one of the main goals of the channel, is to build a community up together. So that is very, very important to me and to everyone here. I think we can all speak to the fact that the community here is amazing. Someone in the last video that I put out earlier this morning mentioned that her mom was hospitalized. She said, please pray for me. It got like 600 likes and like 100+ comments of people giving prayers to her mom in the hospital. That's what it's all about, folks. So that's why we're here at the end of the day, to enter into coherence, resonance, harmony together, to spread peace and love across the world. It sounds silly, but it really isn't. It really isn't. And right now the world can use that more than ever. So let us use these enhanced solar energies for the highest expression, to further our creativity, our soul purpose life mission, to share love with others and out to the world. Bring coherence into yourself. If you do that, the world will also enter into coherence with you. So that's my closing message. Thank you all so much. Namaste. I'll see you all in the next video.